All right, so I think we also have the next event to be started on time, so we should start. Welcome all, of course, to the first featured event, which we have been waiting since long at World Social Summit for Development. The second, of course. And as we move towards the featured event number 1, named Driving Change, Building Accountable Environment of Sustainable Social Justice, Economic, Political, Social and Legal Pathways. We also need to see how strengthened, how strong the civil society movements have been across the globe. And that's one space which we have right now when we very specifically are standing, are sitting, are talking, are having conversations around marginalized groups all together, coming together, discussing on various communities which have been facing discrimination. Jai Bhim, Oporoma, Lenthai, Salve, Uhuru, and of course, good morning to everyone. These are few of the beautiful and powerful greetings which have been part of the global movements across various communities which have been facing very strong systemic marginalization and discrimination happening against them. And I, over here, represent major group of children and youth and Global Forum of Communities Discriminated on Work and Descent, and of course, most importantly, the 270 million people across the globe which are facing work, caste, and descent-based discrimination globally. And of course, most importantly, as a youth, I'm actually standing in front of you and speaking over here. And this featured event has also been co-organized by a major group of children and youth and Social Watch. And it's an honor to welcome you all to the important discussion as we look towards the World Social Summit 2025. That's the second World Social Summit 2025, and reflect on what genuine accountability means in our collective pursuit of justice, especially when we talk about justice always and social development. And of course, as we all know, that accountability is something which cannot be seen in isolation. And it must be understood with a broader framework of social and development justice, which always comes along with accountability, but be it the member states, be it other people who are actually accountable, they often ignore these aspects sometimes. And for millions of people around the world, especially those from the communities discriminated on work and descent, the indigenous group, the migrants, refugees, LGBTQI+, the most marginalized groups are often being forced to be behind the line always when we talk about SDGs and other progress. And true accountability actually means addressing the historical roots of exclusion, confronting systems that normalize discrimination, and ensuring that most affected are not just included, but rather are part of the decision-making process. So that's why we keep talking about again and again. We say that, no, we have included them, we are asking them to speak, but they have to be part of the decision-making process as well, and that's the first steps towards setting up the accountability altogether. And as young people, we are not waiting to be invited into these spaces. We are already leading the process. Me and other young panelists are also the example of this very strongly. And through youth-led movements and roadmap towards World Social Summit, we are shaping an agenda that calls for transparency, that calls for equity, and most importantly for the communities, which I've just mentioned, calls for the dignity for all. And this is why precisely civil society organizations play one of the most, in fact, not one of the most, in fact, the most important role when we talk about our road towards social development. They bring together movements across the globe. That's an example as we sit on the same panel. And connecting local struggles to global advocacy and ensuring that communities like CDWD, which are discriminated on work and descent, communities like indigenous groups, migrants, refugees, and others facing caste-based discrimination are part of this discussion. And of course, as it leads to the decision-making process, and also not only tokenism, which we talk about. And this thing with civil society organizations coming together always has strengthened the process of global movements. And of course, thank you, and I actually look forward to the wonderful dialogue. And I now hand it over to Barbara, who's also my co-moderator, and also the chair of the board of Global Policy Forum, and serves as a policy analyst, and is part-time faculty member at New School Graduate Program for International Affairs. Barbara, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Naveen. Naveen Gautam, I don't know if he introduced himself. He nicely introduced me. In addition, just a couple of comments, as was said. Civil society plays a very, very important role as an advocacy on policy issues, as a provider of services, but in a whole range of different ways. And on the panel today, we have people who are going to speak to those issues. And we also have a representative who is working with, who's a resident coordinator at a country situation. And so what we've got here, if you like, is a global perspective on the policy analysis, a substantive analysis, and also linked to the major group on children and youth. An analysis from a very specific regional context, and also then a country perspective. And one of the things that happens with conferences like this one is the way in which one of its strengths is actually the convening power that brings these various different perspectives and themes together. With regard to this particular focus on social justice, I think we all know, and Nav has already mentioned, how it deals with so many issues: health, food, water, in addition to so many different organizing groups. I have to warn you, we have very little time. And Nav and I are going to do our best, not only to moderate, but to be sharp timekeepers, to make sure that we can also have some interaction with you. And for no further ado, I'm going to turn it back to Nav to introduce the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. So, yeah, we have 4 panelists right now, and I'm glad that we have the full panel. So first, we have Ms. Zara Bazi, who's the program director at the Arab NGO Network for Development, where she has been working for over 14 years. And she has extensive experience with international organization in both the Arab region and Canada, focusing on human rights, social justice, and sustainable development. So should we straight away request the panelists to add? Oh, okay, perfect. Thanks, Barbara. So Zahra Basi, we have a question for you, which says, in the implementation and follow-up to the World Social Summit process, political declaration, what are the key challenges and possible solutions for accountability and sustainable development in the Arab region? Zahra.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the floor. So as we meet here in Qatar, and where the Doha Declaration is adopted by world leaders to boost efforts on social development, and to reaffirm Copenhagen Declaration and add new pledges related to inequality, social protection, care society, and financing for development, it's important to speak honestly about accountability and to move from words to actions, especially in the Arab region, where war, instability, and exclusion continue to block development. Across the Arab region, from Gaza to Sudan, from Yemen to Syria and Lebanon, wars and crises have erased years of progress. Genocides are committed, public institutions are weakened, economies are fragmented, and trust between people and authorities is badly damaged. In such conditions, accountability is not a luxury, it's a lifeline. Without transparency, justice, and participation, there can be no lasting development. There are 3 key challenges for the region and for accountability and social development in the region. First, accountability in times of war. Accountability is often treated as a technical issue. More reports, more data, but in our region, it is a moral, it is a political duty to the people and to their rights, including the right to development. Those in power, nationally and globally, must answer to the people whose lives are put at risk and are shaped by their decisions. Wars and debt drain public budgets, while aid and investments rarely meet local needs. That's why accountability must also be global, to question how international trade, finance, and technology systems affect development in fragile and conflict-affected states. The second challenge is shrinking civic space. Across the region, journalists, activists, and civil society organizations face growing restrictions. Access to information is limited, online expression is monitored, and independent voices are silenced. Yet, civic participation is the foundation of accountability. Without people's voice, there is no transparency or inclusion. As we discuss here in Doha, digital transformation and AI, we must ask ourselves, who has the right to speak and organize online? And how do we ensure digital spaces are open, safe, and grounded in human rights? Supporting civic technologies, protecting freedom of information, and investing in digital literacy are essential to empower citizens and strengthen accountability. The third challenge is the global economic model and the inequalities. The Arab region is central to global trade and energy, yet it remains one of the most unequal in the world. The current financial and trade systems traps developing and conflict-affected countries in cycles of debt and dependency. True accountability requires rebalancing global power, giving Arab and other global South countries a fair voice in shaping the rules on debt, taxation, technology transfer, and climate finance. So, in order to move to a new accountability compact, we need new accountability framework, one that connects peace, human rights, justice, and development. Nationally, we need to rebuild trust through participation, civic space, transparency, and oversight. On the regional level, we need to strengthen cooperation and data sharing on human rights, on gender equality, and on SDGs. And globally, we need to ensure that accountability is mutual, not only from governments to citizens, but also from international actors and corporations to the people they impact. So accountability is how we rebuild our institutions, our economy, and above all, how we rebuild trust. Governments must be accountable to their people. Global systems must be accountable to fairness, to justice, to human rights. And our progress, our true progress, must not be measured by growth, by GDP, but by inclusion, rights, and participation of all.
Thank you, Zara. We really need to ask the question that when we talk about digital literacy, when we talk about accountability, who are those people who are able to access all those online platforms? And we have often missed talking about these issues. And of course, the most marginalized groups have been the ones who have been on the receiving end when we talk about the struggles they face. So thank you very much, Zara, for this one. And of course, as we move towards the process of peace, justice, and development, which very specifically synchronizing them together, Zara had talked about, I'll now request Ms. Gigi Alsobrook, who's a development officer at Migration, Children, and Youth platform. Gigi serves as the Business Development and Partnerships Officer for the Migration, Youth, and Children platform, which she also leads youth-led advocacy and accountability initiatives on youth and migration. I won't give a long introduction, Gigi. We don't have much time, but I'll move to the question again. In the last few years, there has been a stronger emphasis on youth participation at the UN level, which all of us must have seen. I can also see most of the youth sitting in the room right now. That's why this is a very powerful part. What are the couple of examples of what is actually working well, Gigi? And of course, also a couple of examples to, items to flag which we can, improve upon and are also not working. Gigi, is my question clear?
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you so much for the introduction, and also to Nav and Barbara for moderating this discussion, and MGCY and Civil Society for having me. It's great to be here. Over the last years, I've worked closely with young people of varying backgrounds, navigating barriers on education, decent work, and social participation. Their creativity, determination, and courage are inspiring, but yet they continue to face structural, social, and economic barriers and are ultimately excluded. Including young people directly demonstrates what meaningful youth-led accountability looks like in practice. Their lived experience brings nuance and depth to discussions. They point out gaps, highlight what works in communities, and propose practical solutions that decision makers may not see from the top down. Their voices are not symbolic, they are evidence and insight in action. The Doha Political Declaration recognizes itself these gaps, noting that millions of youth lack access to education, employment, and training, and are disproportionately engaged in informal and precarious work. Over the last few years, we've seen a stronger emphasis on youth participation at the global level, and there are real examples of what is working. I'll name two that show both civil strength and institutional progress. The first one is the energy and action of young people themselves. The world often calls us Gen Z, but it's not just a demographic label. It's a wave of community organizing and digital mobilization and local problem solving. From climate strikes like Greta Thunberg and her climate actions since she was about 14, and most recently her actions for advocating for the end of the siege of Gaza, as well as Nepal, Bangladesh, and Timor-Leste, just for a few examples of youth-led uprisings. Also, today we have Mamdani, who's the mayor of New York, and he won the youth vote. Also, local aid and community monitoring projects demonstrate young people are building accountability systems in their own neighborhood. We all know about what's happening currently in Sudan, which is devastating, but I want to touch on it in a more positive way. In 2023, young Sudanese volunteers set up grassroots emergency response rooms to deliver food, medicine, and organize evacuations where formal aid couldn't reach. Embedded in their communities, they combine local knowledge and accountability and transparency, allowing residents to monitor and guide relief. By early 2025, they had helped nearly 280,000 people, showing how youth-led networks can deliver fast, effective, and accountable aid. These movements create pressure, surface evidence, and push institutions to respond. Secondly, institutional openings for youth voices. The creation and strengthening of youth councils and youth constituencies, including greater participation at the UN, ECOSOC processes, many youth consultations which actually turn into action, the formal engagement modalities for major groups, and of course MGCY, which is why I'm here today, and probably one of the reasons why some of you are here today too. And if you're not here with MGCY, there is a huge youth representation here in Doha. We have a WhatsApp group, and I checked this morning, and there's 154 of us, but that's probably not all that are here today. These are important wins. On Monday, the Youth Assembly in Doha produced a concrete blueprint for youth-led accountability and cross-movement partnerships, monitoring projects, monitoring pilots, and plans to feed youth evidence into regional and global review processes. These are practical and scalable examples of institutional change. But we also have to be honest about what doesn't work, and we need to flag what does need to be fixed. And I have chosen 3 to speak about today. First thing is, strong rhetoric alone is insufficient. Nice preambles and participatory language must be followed by measurable action and dedicated resources. Too often, youth participation is tokenized. You tick the box, but you don't invite us to sit at the table. For instance, youth are frequently invited to speak on high-level panels, but excluded from processes that design or evaluate policies afterwards. If we are actually serious about youth inclusion, we cannot stop at consultation. It must come with budgets, decision-making power, and accountability for follow-through. It has to be mainstreamed. Secondly, representation gaps do still remain stark. Important constituencies like people on the move, refugees, asylum seekers, and any type of migrant, indigenous peoples, communities discriminated on work and descent, and others facing caste-based discrimination globally, informal workers, carers, and the most stretched activists are too often absent from the room. Many of those doing day-to-day accountability work are the same people who cannot access visas, who cannot afford unpaid travel, and who cannot simply step away from their communities to sit on the panel. And let's be honest, asking young people to contribute their time and evidence and expertise for free only just deepens this exclusion. Unpaid internships, unpaid youth consultations, and unpaid requests to share knowledge built through lived experience, this has to stop. Accountability cannot be built on invisible labor. Youth participation has to be valued, resourced, and paid for what it is, real work that strengthens our collective progress. Because if we keep asking youth to show up without support, we're not just building inclusion, we're reinforcing inequality, which, as we know, is SDG number 10. Third concern is basically global processes mean little if they don't touch the ground. Policy that isn't informed by local actors and grassroots realities risks becoming performative. Well written, fine, but poorly lived. We need systems that bring youth organizations into design, monitoring and review, not just consultation after the fact, because someone embedded in the community is the actual evidence. They have seen what works, what fails, and what is quietly holding everything together. It is 2025 and we have to move beyond parachuting experts into communities. Real accountability means co-creation with those who live these realities that we are trying to fix. Youth from these communities must be centered in every conversation about their communities if we want sustainable impact. We must start trusting local youth leadership, not just referencing it. The Second World Summit for Social Development today provides a foundation for inclusive growth, decent work, and social protection. And the declaration affirms that the Commission for Social Development has the primary responsibility for follow-up and review. That is precisely where youth-led monitoring should be integrated. We must press the Community for Social Development and regional processes to take youth evidence seriously, to provide entry points for youth reports, and to ensure the youth participation is more than just a presence, it's an influence. When youth are empowered to hold power to account, locally, nationally, and globally, we don't just measure progress, we actually make it happen. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Gigi. And of course, the most powerful statement, as per what I also heard, was accountability cannot be actually based on invisible labor, and most of the youth have to go through this. And also very specific aspect which has come, which we always come across, is how strong are we at the grassroots. We do have spaces. We do have spaces to speak at the United Nations and other regional forums, but how strong the youth movement are at the grassroots and what we as non-youth can do to support that is one question we should always ask to us. With that, I'll just move to Ms. Elena Panova, who's also UN Resident Coordinator in Egypt. Ms. Elena took up the position of UN Resident Coordinator in Egypt in 2021, and she has more than 22 years of development and management experience, including all aspects of program management, cross-area collaboration, and resource mobilization. Elena, how is the UN engaged at the country level in implementation of World Social Summit for Development, Second World Social Summit for Development Declaration, including with civil societies and youth? It's something which I wanted to ask you. Yeah.
First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to bring the country perspective and also to bring the perspective of a United Nations country team that is expected to work, very closely with the civil society at country level. I will echo what, the colleagues were saying. And I think here we are among like-minded. We all share the same views. We all share similar frustrations. And we all, I'm sure, are convinced that we can do much better. And there was, a colleague mentioning that we also, as actors, bear huge responsibility, how we deliver for the people we serve. And I really would like to start, with that thing. That reflection needs to happen. And I think that the Doha summit is calling for this. Because the trust in us, the trust in the institutions is really deteriorating. We see it across the board. I work in a country which embeds a huge complexity, but also a country that has a lot of opportunities. So I will absolutely subscribe to what the colleague was talking when she was talking about the region. And amidst this, we should not forget the bigger picture. right? And here I would like to just remind that we should always understand the big picture, and then we take it, from that point of view. I will be talking about Egypt. Egypt, is a huge country, most populous, second populous on African continent, with a lot of challenges, a middle-income country that is heavily indebted. And I'm sure many of you work in countries where servicing the debt eats up, the resources at local level that could be directed towards education, towards health, towards social protection. So we need to keep that in mind, because something bigger needs to happen so that the countries can deliver on their ambitions. Because in many countries, in many situations, there is a good intention, there is an ambition, but there is no fiscal space to do this. That comes in a rapidly changing world with shifting, geopolitical powers, with technological disruption, climate change challenges, widening inequalities. And on top of it, the financing for development, the ODA, is shrinking. So what do you do at country level when you have indebtedness, when you have, decreased, less access to resources? How do you make sure that you still deliver on, to the people, and you deliver on the commitments of the Doha, right? And I feel very happy that we finally reached the point where we globally discuss social justice, we globally discuss social protection, not just, a vector, right? But also as a way forward that will ensure resilience and sustainable development. Investing in human capital, leaving no one behind. So what do you do in a situation where, what is our responsibility and accountability as United Nations, and also the responsibility, accountability of the civil society, right? In addition to the government, but let's really reflect on what we could do better as main actors when it comes to delivering to the people. And delivering to the most vulnerable, because with the cuts, with the decreasing financing to development, we know it. We all come from country levels. The most impacted are the most vulnerable. From Egypt's perspective, when the cuts happened, and I'm talking here UN, right? 87 million. And 87 million of programs were cut, and they were cut migrants, refugees, and host communities, the most vulnerable in the context of Egypt. Women and girls so hardly, earned gains in that space, and programs were halted. And then children, learning spaces for, the Palestinian children that are currently residing in Egypt, which do not have access to the formal education. So the most vulnerable were impacted. And who are the actors that are delivering to the most vulnerable? It's the UN, and it's the NGOs. That's, the story. We are the ones that are working closely with the government and supporting, in some cases, like migrants and refugees, the entire responsibility is on us when it comes to delivering social protection, access, and all this. So, and who was also, it was the UN and it was the NGOs that were impacted by these cuts. And then the next step, and I saw it, in making, we all rushed to the donors. All the UN agencies, NGOs, trying, to compete and trying to see how we can diversify. And then at some point we said, okay, hold on. Because if we start competing, if we don't collectively reflect on the situation, we're not going to go anywhere. So in Egypt, one thing, and I will mention two examples, which I see them as positive. I'm not saying they're excellent, and I'm not saying they're yet, a full success, but I think they lay a very good ground for us coming together and delivering together. Because in many cases, there's a lot of overlap. There should be a complementarity, but there is an overlap. There is no meaningful engagement, right? We see each other more UN, being there. We have a huge footprint in Egypt. We see the NGOs more as implementing partners instead of really, partners, meaningful engagement. So we have a format which we've established a few years ago, which is called, NGO UN dialogue. We meet every quarter. And when the cuts happened, when obviously, the changes were unfolding, we decided, and that's what we are finalizing, to do a joint vulnerability assessment to understand, but jointly, NGOs together with the UN, and that was led by the NGOs, to see where we stand when it comes, what's the impact of all these changes, of all these cuts, of all the pressures from migration, on the systems in Egypt, to see where we stand with that joint vulnerability assessment. And in our next dialogue, what needs to happen, we will reflect, understand the vulnerability assessment, and then we will go to the government and have a discussion with the government and reflection jointly, because there are many areas when one would expect the government to step up, or at least to realize, right, where the situation is. That's number one. So a good format that puts a structure in these relations between the UN and the civil society. And number two, talking about young people, again, representation, I need to, finish. I will just give the small example. What we did in Egypt, we established, and we are one of the 40 countries that has a youth advisory board to the UN country team. So it's not just a consultative body, it's an advisory board from young people across the country, where we expect them to be next to us when we are doing our programming. I will stop here, apparently. I don't have... there will be a second round of questions. Okay. Thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you, Elena. And also thank you for bringing up the aspect of accountability of civil society organizations as well. But the reality is also that there is a major fund crunch happening across the globe, which all the civil society organizations are also facing extensively. But thank you for bringing up the whole aspect of accountability again. Now we have one of the most wonderful person on the panel. All of you, of course, everybody else is. But we have she who's also a lawyer from University of Malaya and also has a degree from University of Cambridge. She's also the executive director of the Third World Network. Shia, you have come across more and more reports which are focusing on the challenges when we talk about social development extensively. Maybe from your own experience, if you can talk about few of the key areas which illustrate these things very specifically, and what are the next steps when we talk about social development.
Thank you very much, Navin, and to Barbara for curating this panel, and to all of you, good day. I was just listening to the speeches yesterday and also this morning at the civil society opening, and two sets of ideas came up very strongly: inequality and social justice. That these are the underpinnings for social protection as a human right. And if we look at where we are today, in 2025, last week, one company, NVIDIA, hit a $5 trillion evaluation on Wall Street. Let's think about what that means. One company linked to chips, linked to AI, which all our politicians say will be the new world for us. And nobody can tell me, and I don't know what AI really means, because we all use the term. We're having huge policy, AI economy, but nobody actually knows what we're talking about when we use the term AI. And actually, it's not very intelligent either, okay? The other point is that new data has come out that, and this is on this new data is on actually inherited wealth, and it turns out that there are $70 trillion is expected to be handed down as legacy, as inheritance in the next 10 years, which means that we are going to see a deepening of who will, in the next generation, be inheriting enormous wealth, while others were not just left behind, but are the majority who never got into the journey. So it's not about leaving behind. Leaving behind means we are bringing everybody together, and some are left behind. Let's deal with the left behind. But if the majority are really not able to be mobile, in moving out in income, and on top of that, in many of our societies, we have caste, we have religion, we have patriarchy, we have misogyny, and now we have a lot of xenophobia as well. So these layers, actually compounded by wealth inequality, will actually drive inequality even more. And we have talked a little bit here and there about digital. Digital AI is not, as a very good friend of mine working in this area says, it is not a revolution. It is an evolution. When we talk about semiconductors, we talk about microchips, we talk about the first time we used a computer 40, 50 years ago. So AI is a continuum. And I think we have to understand that, so that we do not think of semiconductors and AI as clean, as high-tech, as the way we are going to revolutionize development and bring empowerment to everybody, women and children. You know, they always want to empower women and children. Technology is actually a political project. So if we look at this example, from mining the rare earth, and not just rare earth, every mineral on this planet is needed for this industry. So we got mining, then we got processing. Every stage is very toxic. And then we have to move into the production. And then we now have data centers. Every time, unfortunately, we don't think about it, and we should think about it, about accountability. Every time we download something on TikTok, every time we prompt ChatGPT, for example, every time you ask ChatGPT a question, 15 bottles of water is needed to run the data centers. So an average hyper data center in my country, in Malaysia, can actually fuel the electricity needs of a medium-sized town of 150,000 people. So water, electricity, you look at the whole ecosystem, or what we see as the digital economy, is highly extractive, it's polluting, it impacts on communities, and it drives inequality. Because who owns these technologies? So whether it is every level of our history of development in the area of technology, it has been in the hands more and more of a few corporations. And I think we see the height of it in the digital arena. And locking this, there's no accountability of those who, in the name of innovation, have put into place, since the World Intellectual Properties Agreement on the World Trade Organization's agreement on intellectual property. This is only in 1995 when it came into being, and was the first international standard on proprietorship and private ownership. Patents, trademarks, trade secrets. We saw how in COVID, a few pharmaceutical companies controlled much needed life-saving, not just vaccines, even masks. Did you know that the super duper mask that everybody needed had 200 patents around it? I can never understand, how do you have 200 patents of monopoly over a mask? And many of our medicines should really be available for manufacturing in most of our regions and countries, but they're locked up in private property rights, so that we don't have enough, not just vaccines in the pandemic, we don't have enough antibiotics. And many of the diseases that the poorest country, the most vulnerable peoples, not just poor, but even middle-class people, do not get the kind of medicines they need. The disease of the majority of people, the diseases don't get attention because rich companies, rich innovators, so-called, and pharmaceutical industry only will design for those who can pay. And the use of AI to speed up gene sequencing, to do innovation faster, to do gene testing, are all about not leaving people behind, but carving out populations, huge populations in the planet, where we will have no access to medical care, to the most basic. At the same time, debt, austerity, privatization notions that sound so attractive because it's supposed to be more efficient, has really destroyed public health systems. We have destroyed our public education systems. And today, farmers across Asia, South America, Africa are fighting to retain sovereignty over seas, over knowledge, over how we practice farming. Because the few seed companies and chemical companies, again, wanting to solve all our food needs with drones and AI, are promising that technology will solve poverty, technology will solve our health problems, technology will also feed us. And the question is no. Because technology is diversity, knowledge is systems and diversity, and it is in the hands of people. For young people, we see in Gaza, generation after generation, the whole area of the Palestine territories. Where is there hope? If you live in a territory, and it's not just in that region, we see it across Sudan, we see it across Yemen, so many of our countries, and we have warships off the waters of Venezuela. Why? Because we do not conform to a certain idea of development and power. As we speak, country after country are being pulled into bilateral negotiations with Washington. And those negotiations deny everything that United Nations has stood for, because it really is about power. And just yesterday, there was an attempt in the International Maritime Organization to introduce some degree of climate resilience, into shipping. The industry is very polluting in terms of emissions. The United States are now reported, I'm going to end here, as bullying not just developing countries. We're kind of used to being bullied in negotiations. But I think the European delegations got bullied, threatened with personal threats if they were to push for a shipping industry that will be more climate friendly. It's all coming out. What do? We're not despairing, because there are so many things being done. Gig workers are organizing. Gig economy workers have no rights. But today, we see in India, we see in Malaysia, we see in Indonesia, and we will see more and more across Africa and South America, and it started in Europe. Uber drivers, gig workers, they're all organizing. So political organizing is the way to do it. Young people are working with people with experience, because nothing is really new. So let's not waste our time. Let's work together. And there are human rights instruments, there are human rights special rapporteurs. Let's defend the human rights, social, economic rights, not just civil, political. And together, we have mechanisms to defend, to improve, and it has to be really at the heart of it, with people involved. Thank you.
I don't know about you. I have never's a big word. I can't remember when I've been in an event where 4 people in such a short space of time have delved into so much of the analysis and substantive issues that we're dealing with, and that definitely affect the work we all do together for social justice, have on the one hand identified really, really important ways, the right to participate, and how that right isn't just straightforwardly come and let's talk, but actually also has to address both structural and institutional support and commitments, and has also covered the range of commitment that is taking place at local levels with people that are discriminated against, all the way to the global level in terms of the challenges it faces and hopefully the space that it creates for people to do the work they are so obviously committed to doing. I think you all know that the Copenhagen meeting, the so-called first World Summit on Social Development, took place 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, the incoming mayor of New York City was 4 years old. And I dare say there are some people in the room that maybe were less in age than he is. So, and the other thing to say, this session and the conference is structured around the commitments that were made in Copenhagen. And through this day, we have a program on those commitments. The essence of the commitment 1 that we're talking about was accountability to people, was accountability to the public sector, was about the right to participate. And the discussion was about an enabling environment that was going to make that happen. We're in a very, very different world today, as you've heard very clearly from the panelists, from a range of different experiences. But we still have that fundamental challenge. That fundamental challenge of accountability to people, not to work on their behalf, but for them to represent and be represented. One of the huge challenges we're facing now compared with 30 years ago is so much of what affects both participation and damage, and the ways in which one wants to correct that is global as well as national and local. One of the challenges I'm going to put out to you as we go to a Q&A session is I'm going to ask you to contribute in the same way. I'm going to ask you to have very short comments, but I want you to focus on what we need to do for follow-up. I want you to identify, not repeat, sorry, time is tight, what you are doing. I feel very confident I'm in a room of people doing a lot of fantastic things. We trust that. We trust each other. I want you to identify the key elements of follow-up from your experience that a process like this one really needs to address. There is going to be a UN meeting summit in 5 years' time with regard to social justice. And we really need to get inequalities, which is the essence of so much of what we're talking about, inequalities everywhere, as you've heard. We really need to move the whole business of tackling and reducing inequalities to the center of the UN agenda. It is not there. As we've heard already, there are different sectors, different constituencies doing a fantastic job in their areas. But we must not be competing with each other for limited resources. And all of this is happening at a time when we've also heard from Eleanor that the cutbacks around the UN and the global system are severe. They are overnight and they are happening. So the solution cannot just be more resources, more resources. The issue is, where is that money going and where is it coming from? So I'm going to open up. Please indicate those who would like to make a contribution. I'm quite short. I will do my best to see you all. If I need help, I know I've got Nav there to help me. So please indicate. I'm going to try and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoa. Okay. Stop. That's okay. 1, 2. Do it again. 3. I hope you remember your number because I'm going to get confused. No, there's too many men. Okay, 1, 2, 3, I got that far. I'll come back to you in the next round. 4 and 5. 5, okay, please remember your number, because, so please.
Thank you.
And please, everybody, please keep it on topic, pertinent, tight. And if you have a particular question for the panelists, and I warn you, I'm going to cut you off if you go too long. Okay? I'm apologizing in advance.
Thank you very much indeed. My name is Ziaur Rahman, and I'm from Pakistan. I represent Pakistan Development Alliance and Asia Development Alliance. We've been talking about 30 years ago. So 30 years ago, I was 24 years old. I had control over my thoughts. I had fully control over my ideas and the agendas. I founded Awaz. I was preparing proposals. I was actually driving the force because the community were guiding me. But today, do you see that we have that kind of authority, capability, power? No. We are being controlled through RFPs. I'm just coming back from the International Civil Society Week. A professor in the Thammasat University, he was saying that 20 years before, the democracy in the world was 50%, 50% people were living in the democracies. Today, 28% people are living in the democracies. And the situation in Asia is even worse than the globe. Only 3% people live in Asia under democracies. So when I hear these nice words in the plenaries, in the forums, today even, and yesterday, that civil society is the co-creator, is a partner in development, is the forefront leaders, maybe in the global forums. But what is happening at the national level, at the sub-regional level, at the local level, nobody knows that. The civic spaces are shrinking, democracies are under attack, and we really don't have be able to say that now we are moving ahead. I think we are regressing much. So sorry for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you and thank you not. Number 2 is back there.
Thank you, Ma'am and Chair. I am representing on GFOD, the Asian Dalit Rights Forum. So my question concerns about the accountability for the social protection as a human right. In my personal experience, I was a Dalit. I faced untouchability. I was isolated from the society. We have so many policies, but till now, what is the meaning of the social protection for the discriminated communities? While most countries have a social protection policies, and very few have a legal and institutional systems that allow the citizens to claim their rights or seek redress when they are denied. So what are the steps can the UN and the member states take to make social protection legally enforceable and transparent and participatory, especially like me, the communities discriminated and work and dissent? Thank you.
Who's number 3? You're number 3? Okay.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. So, hi, everyone. Thank you for the panelists. Thank you for the facilitators. And thank you for everyone in the room. So, in brief, I'm Yasmin. I'm from Egypt. I work with civil society organizations across the region. And I'm coming here with the major group for youth and children. And I'm representing a climate organization. So, I resonate with most of the panel. My question, and I will be very, very brief, but it's related to my experience throughout this year. I started doing a lot of youth advocacy and youth mobilization, especially this year since CSW and up until now. And all the time when I leave these spaces, these kind of global spaces where we all come together, emphasizing the same word, repeating and more or less the same message, it comes to my mind that after such event, what happens? How can we still emphasize the same things that we're saying here? And the same thing comes to my mind every time, which is co-sharing power, co-sharing spaces. And I don't know, but you're the experts here, and I wanted to seek your opinion. What does co-sharing mean for you? Is it a place where young people are consulted, paid consultation or organized, and then the governments take the decision at the end of the day? Or like the political declaration says, yes, a lot of mobilization with the civil society has been happening, but at the end, it was an intergovernmental process. So that's my question. What's your take on co-sharing power? And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. She's got it. I think you were the real number 3.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just before the session, I was attending the...
Please introduce yourself.
I am Aloysius from India, representing the Global Forum of Discrimination Based on Work and Dissent. Just before this session, I was attending the CSO opening statement, opening event. And the last speaker, who was summing up, so to say, made 4 points, and one of the points was very important point. It was very striking for me. That is to say, when she said she went through the whole political document, one point that was missing is accountability. Accountability. And that's why I'm very happy that we have taken up this theme of accountability in this event. Now my question is, 2030, SDG 2030, is it going to be a year of celebration of SDG, completion, fulfillment, or is it going to be a year of postponement, another postponement? In which case, the follow-up is going to become extremely important for civil society in terms of accountability, because the state actors, I can say as example in my own country, the state actors look at people as consumers, not only economic consumers, but also not only market consumers, they are political consumers, even in what you call in view of elections and so on. Not as subjects. I can very well say not as subjects. And therefore, I think as a follow-up, civil society has focused on how we are going to energize the people and engage them for accountability, particularly the youth. I think this is important. I have a few points about that which I'm not going to mention now, not necessary. Practical ways. I think energizing people, engaging them, I think such designs are needed. People and the youth. I think we are the ones, the state will never do this. I think we have to do it in terms of considering people as subjects, as really producers of a new society, not consumers. Thank you very much.
Over here, in the front, right at the end.
Thank you. My name is Najla Haj. I'm from Search for Common Ground. I was listening with very much interest till I heard. I think it's working, right?
You need to hold it close.
Oh. Till I heard with interest that.
Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Nigla Haj. I'm from Search for Common Ground. I was listening with interest till I heard someone from the panel saying, we need a new frame for accountability. How many new frames do we need? And I think this is exactly what governments want to hear from us. New frames after new frames, and we are in the never-ending circle of wasting resources and not really addressing the real issues. The other point, and I would like to take Egypt as an example, since we have someone from Egypt. We know the working landscape in Egypt, and we know how their accountability issue has been compromised by systematic issues. And we are failing. We are failing ourselves. We are failing the Egyptian civil society, but we also feel failed by UN agencies by not supporting us in addressing the red lines. We provide a lot of compromises. How do we get out of that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, and then on the over there. You can see I'm in a rush, can't you? We're already extended our time, but we're going to go for at least another 7 minutes, okay? Overall, I mean.
Thank you for this session. My name is Dr. Peter Olumuji from Nigeria. I represent International Association of World Peace Advocates. I have a question to ask from the contribution of the Speaker 1 and Speaker 2, where they talked about the voices of the youth, very essential, and the shrinking of the civil space, gaining access to information. My own focus will be on the youth, and the question goes thus: how can the digital space be open more to the youth to access relevant information with the assistance of the United States? Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to sneak in two more. I'm going to sneak in two more. Ooh, I shouldn't have said that. I was going to say I'm going to sneak in two more questions before turning back to the panel and ask them to be equally brief. But since I made that mistake, I've seen many more than two hands. Okay, I'm going to pick up a couple of people from the first round and apologize very much to everybody else. Someone here in the front row and then someone three. And please be focused questions, be sensitive for everybody in time. Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Sylvia Beals. I work with different networks, and I here represent the Grey Panthers, which is an activist organization which has a motto or a guiding principle, which is age and youth in action. So that's what I want to focus on. Rather than splintering, let us work linked arms to take action across generations.
Sylvia, I'm sorry.
We've
already been told we have to wrap up. So
can I just say one thing? In the UK, we have the phenomenon of people demonstrating against something called Palestine Action, which is now prescribed. The people who are going to prison are the old people because they know, it's okay they go to prison, but the young ones, it's not okay. So they've got an arrangement. We need to have intergenerational arrangements for struggle and activism to do exactly what Zia was pointing out. And if anything comes out of this summit, let us strengthen those bonds. And I'd like to hear your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I apologize to everybody. I am now moving to be the taskmaster because we're already over time. I don't know if the panel can cope with the fact that I'm going to give them approximately a minute and a half, but I'm going to say one more thing. Clearly, there's a lot more that this group wants to engage with and talk about. I don't know whether we can find another time and another room spontaneously, but we will explore that. And if that comes together, you will receive the time and location on your various WhatsApp groups or emails. Okay? Okay, let me see. Should we start from that end? Do you want to start, Eleanor?
Thank you very much for being so frank with all of us. I think some of the issues that you touched upon, they will continue to be issues, right? So don't expect us to give answers and solutions. And this is where the shared accountability, shared responsibility needs to come. This is where I was talking about meaningful engagement, right? When we don't just see each other as competitors and partners, but we meaningfully engage. And I gave a few examples. On the first speaker, how you make sure that social protection is equal for all, right? That it becomes a human right. Here, again, I will go back to the example of Egypt, where migrants and refugees are in this space where they're not covered by the social protection, by the safety net, right? By law, they are not. Only health, education, but when it comes to safety net, they are not. What do you do, right, as NGOs? You try to, provide support in that space where the government is not providing the space. On the social protection, you establish...
Helena, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
Co-sharing power, that needs to be put again into the context. What do you mean co-share? What do we do after this forum? You go to your own organization and you work at the grassroots level, if it is there. You don't expect that you will be co-sharing.
I apologize. Yeah. This is where I am much tougher than I look. Zara.
And thank you for, On the red lines, I wanted to mention, but
please, please. We are already being rude to the next group coming in. We really have to keep moving. Yes.
Okay. I want to thank everyone for the contributions, like the very rich contributions. I will not answer questions because there are lots of issues. I think that I need to confirm that accountability is needed at this point. It's not a framework that is needed specifically or something new. It's to reaffirm our commitments to accountability, to participation of different stakeholders, of civil society specifically, more space for civil society, for really contribution in policy making and in implementation of Doha Declaration.
Okay, just three things. Follow-up must be participatory. We also need to be working with local actors, and it has to be working from the ground up. And also, I was thinking about who we're accountable to, and it's a big question, and we talk about being accountable to our governments, being accountable to parliaments, whatever, but I also do think we need to be accountable to ourselves, and I do think there's a huge power to youth in these movements. Thanks.
Thank you.
When you have power, you don't give it up. So nobody's going to give it to us. And I think holding power to account is absolutely crucial. We are living in a world today which is deeper than ever in terms of inequality. The World Bank and IMF has only one veto power. We always talk about the Security Council, but Barbara always reminds me, you pay $1, you get one vote. And so the one richest country in the world has a veto power. That's why they will never walk out of the IMF and World Bank. They'll walk out of the WHO. The United States just paid up all its dues to the World Trade Organization. So you can see where the power is. So I think we have to hold accountability to power. And I was a young person before, also all of us were. I was mentored. I was mentored by those who brought history of our colonialism, history of activism, and what we could do that could go wrong, and understand where we are locally and also to learn globally. We don't come to these conferences to get solutions. We come here because we want to be each other. We go back and we organize with knowledge. Thank you.
We are already over time. I'm going to thank the panelists, but I'm also going to thank all of you. The questions, the focus, the way in which we understand accountability, and the way in which we understand that we are an important part of this process of change. Thank you all very, very much.